just love them. Do you know that this is the oldest form of rhythm there is? And everybody has one. Right there. And when you're even smaller than this one here, you have that inside because you're hearing the rhythm of your mother's heartbeat. So it's primal. And it's about time. Because primal, as far as we're concerned, is still time. Because time is a construct. We constructed it. And the thing about time is that we hold on to it, we run out of it, we spend it, we sometimes give it, but we can never regain it. So they tell us. But with this, and this is actually a very magic thing. Anybody know Doctor Who? Know about Doctor Who? The TARDIS? You heard of the TARDIS? Well, the TARDIS is, in Doctor Who, a policeman's phone box, very old-fashioned one, blue one. And TARDIS actually means time and relative dimensions in space. So Doctor Who can jump in his little police box and go anywhere at any time. How would it be to do that? Is that possible? Well, I'm here to tell you it is. It's very possible. And it's all done with the beat of a drum. From time gone by, we have been sitting by fires in caves or out of them, and we have been listening to the beat and patter of rain on leaves. We've been listening to the wind go through tree stumps and logs, and hearing those noises and making stories about them by that fire, the fire that sits there and licks and talks to the sky, and all these lights that are in the sky. And we make stories about that too, until we understand them better. And by understanding them better, we kind of lost the magic slightly. And we kind of got into this. I've got to be on time. I've got to stay in time. There's history, there's now, and then there's tomorrow. And I need to be in tomorrow. I need to catch up. I'm always catching up. I have to always run to just be in one place at the one time. That's how it should be. Instead, it's a bit which breaks everything up completely. Now, the interesting thing about time is that, as I say, we can have it, we can spend it, we can give it away. But it's a construct. It's a construct. We made it up. We saw a sun that went from one place to the other, and we thought, how can we break this day up? Oh, well, let's call it a day. How do we break this up? How do we move? How do we be? When do we sleep? When do we dream? And when we dream, where does time go? Because time doesn't exist in the dream world. And that brings me back to this. By doing a certain amount of beats to a drum in a certain way, in 5 minutes you can go into a different reality. You can become Doctor Who without a TARDIS. Actually, you have this one. Now, this is part of the shamanic culture, and there are shamanic cultures all over the world. Even here, the Celtics were a shamanic culture, particularly because we tell stories. And the shamans love stories. Mythology is truth, because it's warning. Fairy tales are not for children, they're for adults, because they tell you where the bad things are and how to get around them. But in saying that, I'm kind of digressing, and I do that a lot, because I'm in and out of time zones all the time. See, it's in our language all the time. When I'm working, I'm not doing this because I don't see this as work. This is play. This is good fun. From the beat of a drum, I can take this beat and ride this beat out into another reality where the ancestors are. Now the ancestors, some people think is like your granny and granddad, but I'm talking way back. All the way back to when we were still sitting outside of caves, learning how to play with fire. And in the old days, the shaman of the village was the one who could talk to the ancestors and could fly off on the spirit horse, which is the beat of the drum, and go and talk to the ancestors and find out where the best place to be for food was, where the next place for water was, where the next fight was going to be happening, and whether or not you were going to win it. Not too sure if some of them didn't have their own kind of reasoning behind that. But more often than not, because of the connection that they had with their space, with their time, they could do that. And when they came back and related the story to the people, then the people would listen and they would move to where the shaman told them. Now, you know this thing about faking it until it happens, faking it to make it. Interestingly enough, they would do that for hunts. They would go at the fire before the hunt, before they were due to go out hunting, and they would tell stories of their greatest hunters and their greatest battles with their greatest saber-toothed daggers or great monsters of the night, who were probably very quite small, but they just sounded big in the night time. And then they would dance. And because they saw the animals do what they did, and they watched the animals, and they saw how the animals lived in concert with nature, being who they are, just being every day, they learned to do that too. Some of them learned it better than others, because let's face it, some of them ended up the animals' dinner, so they weren't doing that too well. But each to his own. They were actually bending their time. By connecting to nature, they were in flow with the seasons. We don't do that anymore. If you walk into a supermarket, the first thing you see is the next season's stock on the shelf. So you're already thinking, I don't know, I think by next month we'll be having Christmas shelves going on. You know, it seems to get earlier every year. So we're going further forward, and we're getting out of rhythm with the time. We're not seasonal anymore. There is a situation where we're standing here, this is now, but most often we choose to be thinking about what happened yesterday and mithering about that. Or we skip now and go straight into the future, that great metropolis that hasn't actually been built yet. And unfortunately, the bricks for that building is right here, now. But we are off scattering, changing ourselves and running around willy-nilly after things that actually don't even exist yet. Or we're mithering about the mistakes we made and how it used to be so much better. And we forget to stay here. So what this talk is about, really, it's not just shamanism, but it's about walking the ceremonial way. Because shamanism, shamanic cultures, make ceremony a lot. And people don't realise that actually you make ceremony a lot too. You have a routine, you have habits. Habits is just a ceremony. You do it all the time. You make your tea a certain way. Do you put your milk in first or do you put your tea in first? And if you see someone else do it differently, you don't like it very much. That's your ceremony, that's your ritual. How dare they? It doesn't taste right if you don't do it that way. But there are other things that you can be doing. You can make a simple ceremony to go along with your tea, because the first thing people say to me is, oh, I don't have time to do that. I've got so much to do. I've got the shopping, I've got the washing, I've got little Johnny's nose to wipe and his bum to clean, and I've got this and I've got that and I've got the other. I haven't got time to even look at myself in the mirror. Well, you do, hopefully, sometimes. But do you take time to stand in line at Starbucks? Or Costa, or whichever your mug of coffee choice is? Do you take time to stand at a bus stop waiting, or a train? Do you take time to sit and watch EastEnders? Or Coronation Street? When you're actually not really watching it, you're just like... Instead of doing that, for 5 minutes, not even, you could be thinking about how your day was, being grateful for things, looking at things and saying, that didn't work out too badly. Maybe I can do that tomorrow. Maybe I can build on that tomorrow. And actually saying to yourself and telling yourself, that's the secret. It's what you say. The words count. And they don't just count when you speak them, because actually thoughts come first. Thoughts and feelings come first. And that's where the power is. Because they come and then they are allowed to fly on the breath. And it's the invective of the breath that lets them go. Once they've gone, you can't have them back. That time is gone. But the words do count. The thoughts count. When you're thinking to yourself, I do not know where I'm going to do this. I just feel so down. And you can see that happen to you all the time. You can. I keep saying it all the time. So what would happen if instead of, you thought, let's switch this up a bit. Let's just put the chin up and inspire. Now, inspiration, there's a word for you. It doesn't just mean to take breath in. It means inspiring yourself to do something wonderful. And something wonderful could just be doing something slightly different than you would normally do it. And yeah, we've been doing this for centuries, millennia. Because actually, we are now getting, you know this saying, there's nothing new under the sun? Well, really, there's not. Because all the way back in time, they were sitting there going, we're going to have a good hunt tomorrow, we're going to kill this beast, and we're going to feed all these people. Or we're going to go out on a trek, and we're going to find that water because they said we would. And we believe them. Because they've been right before. And that's it. You follow it and you figure out what works, what doesn't. But the interesting thing is that you will find what you are looking for. And if you go looking for disaster and chaos, you will find disaster and chaos. And that will embed into you, and it will tell you that it's not worth trying to do anything differently anymore. So you'll just stay over here in the past, dreaming about what could be over there, instead of actually changing your mind in here. Inspiration actually comes from inspiritus, the taking in of spirit. And it's your spirit that actually gets you moving and makes you think about things. And it's your conscious mind that says, nah, you don't really want to do that, you want to have a chocolate. You want to sit down and have a curry and a beer. You don't want to go out outside in the grass. You don't want to go out and say hello to the sun. Because if you did, you might breathe in and get oxygen and feel better. And then you get your backside off the couch. And you might do something else different. You might go and see somebody like this one who's talking to you now, saying really strange things and, doing really strange things. And it's true. But sometimes we get a shock also. Has anybody experienced a stop the world moment? Yeah. Do you know what a stop the world moment is? I bet you've had one. Just at that point where the thing is going to happen, suddenly everything slows down. And it's almost as if you have all the time in the world to do something. for some reason, you don't. And this train wreck that is encroaching upon you just keeps coming. Now, I've had a few of these myself, and since it's a small group, I'm going to tell you. I used to work in Monaco, and I was working for a rather high-up person there. And we got invited to go to the carol service. Now, as you can see, I'm not really a carol service kind of girl. I'm also not a wear skirts and high heels kind of girl. Because at that time I was a vet nurse and I was more into wellies and boiler suits and having slathering dogs all around me and cats everywhere. But I was told, you have to go. The boss says, you have to go. It's expected. Have you told her what happens when I go into places like this? Well, I didn't want to say anything because it's your first month. Okay. So, I get dressed up. I've got my little, almost Princess Diana-like collar thing on with the red thing, and I've got this skirt. Now, this is the 80s. Some of you probably weren't even born then. This was the 80s. And they had these things called pencil skirts, which I think they've come back into fashion again. But they kind of draw you in at the knees. And you kind of have to walk like that, because that's the only thing that you've got to be going on with. So I end up in this church, and it's an ecumenical service. And there are 5, count me, 5 different Christian-related priests and people there. And I'm like, okay, I have not a clue what I'm supposed to be doing here, but I'll just sit down and I'll watch what everybody else does. And it was quite good because there was a lot of people getting up and down and doing things, and so I just kind of bobbed down and bobbed up, and then I realised I was coming to the end. And I realised I was actually going to have to move. And I wasn't listening to what was going on. All I was interested in was how I was going to manoeuvre myself from this chair onto kind of my knees without actually falling down and getting stuck. And there's the clue. Now, I'm on this bench pew that you got, and I've got a 94-year-old woman who's like this with a walking stick. Then I have my friend and my brother, and there's me, and then at the very end, there's a couple of women from the English bookshop. That's the only people there. Now, while I'm trying to figure this out, I realise that there's someone sitting in front of me. All I can see is the shape of a man in a suit. Don't really matter about it. Also at the pulpit, there's a guy with, you remember the ghetto blasters? These big radio things. Well, in those days, the video cameras were like that. So this guy had to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger to have this thing on his shoulder. And he's in the pulpit, and he's recording this. Because it turns out that Prince Rainier, who didn't like to attend these things, liked to watch them later. Oh boy, was he in for a treat. Because we were only one chair behind. So it comes to the point. And I've got it. I've got it. Oh! One hand on the back, one hand on the front, swivel backside, and you can hear the Hawaii 5-0 music going. Da, 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 da. The guy in the front only gets up at the same time. Boom! He goes forward, splat on the floor like this,